Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear us well on Zoom? All
Loud
right.
and clear.
Yes.
We're in this beautiful room here and at the J, and we can just speak in a normal voice, and you can hear us nicely. The technology is really great. I'm Rabbi Stoller. This is Rabbi Yoni from Beth Israel. I'm from Temple Israel, we are. Well, why don't we start with our blessing for study, and then I'll introduce the topic and turn it over to Rabbi Yoni. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So our topic for tonight is holiday observances across the denominations. So Rabbi Yoni is here as an Orthodox rabbi. I'm here as a Reform rabbi. And so we'll be able to talk a little bit about our respective traditions and try to give a picture of how our communities think about matters of holiday observance. I will say also, as a matter of introduction, I think there was with scheduling our teachers tonight, there's some kind of scheduling issue. So both Rabbi Yoni and I got the call to step in and teach only within the last few hours. But fortunately, we're rabbis and we know something about holidays, so we can jump in. But we do want to invite you to all to ask questions and make comments to help give us some things to respond to, and I think we can have a great conversation from there. So Rabbi Yoni, you want to start us off?
Thank you very much. So I think the first step will be to break down the holidays that we have in Judaism, okay, and try to figure out what holiday is from the Torah, what holiday we receive a little bit later. So we all know that we have from the Torah three main holidays. We do not call them today the high holidays, so maybe see why. But we have three main holidays. We call them Shloshet Regalim. That's of course Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Okay, or Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, if I'm not saying it with the American accent. Okay, but these are the three main holidays that we have from the Torah. Except that we have also Rosh Hashanah. Okay, that maybe soon we'll discuss a little bit about Rosh Hashanah, and we have of course Yom Kippur. Both of them are from the Torah, but they are mentioned in a different way that we maybe observe them today, or maybe we know them today. Afterwards, we have, of course, two very special holidays that we all love and celebrate. We have Hanukkah and we have Purim, okay? And we have some other small holidays, for example, Tu B'Av, that is less popular today. Maybe less people observe it or celebrate it today. But we have that as well. Also, I think part of the Jewish calendar, it's very important to mention that. But in order to try to understand the Jewish calendar, and from that maybe to speak about the holidays, I think we need to go back to the Jewish calendar. So I brought with me this Gemara, Masechet Rosh Hashanah, okay, that this entire Gemara talks about the fascinating idea how exactly the Jewish calendar works and how exactly we get to the days of the holiday that we celebrate today. So we all know that in Judaism, well, let's start differently. In other religions, we have, for example, Christianity goes with the calendar following the sun, right? And Islamic follow the moon. In Judaism, we combine both of them together. That's why we have a pretty weird calendar. And every other third year or so, we add another month in order to catch up to make sure that our holidays, specifically the holiday of Pesach, will land on the right date. For example, this year we have another month of Adar. We call it Shana Me'uberet. Leap year, right? That's the term in English. Leap year. And but in order to explain that, let's go back to the Gemara and try to figure out how exactly the Jewish calendar works. So the Jewish calendar works in the way that every month, back in the days of the temple or the days of Beit Midrash, every month we had to have witnesses to come and witness the moon. Okay, why the moon? Because we follow the moon of the beginning and the end of the month. Okay, for example, we all know that according to Judaism, when we have a full moon, that's the middle of the month. Okay, so now, for example, Rosh Chodesh, the first day of the month of Kislev, is landing on Friday. So now, if you'll go outside and look at the moon, you'll see that the moon is pretty small. It will get even smaller towards Friday. And on Friday, there will be even a period of time that you won't see the moon because then it flips. Okay, and I'm not going into astronomy, totally different topic, but we need to understand that we all know probably that the reflection, that the moon gets the light from the reflection of the sun. Okay, so in Israel, and all the calendar goes according to the times in Israel, the way that the sun works, the reflections that the sun reflects on the moon, okay, on the end of the month, we see very small part of the moon, and it flips, okay, to the other side on the beginning of the Jewish calendar. So the way that it used to work before Hillel, the great rabbi from the Gemara, gave us the calendar that we follow today. By the way, a very interesting something to know. In 180 or so years from now, the calendar ends. Okay, I don't know why you scheduled it only for 2,000 years and not more, but that won't be our problem. Maybe a few generations after us, but there will be a great problem because they won't have the calendar that we follow today. So they will need to create a new system or follow I believe the system that we have today. But back before the days of that calendar, people used to come, literally two people had to come and witness in front of the court system the moon. And that's very important. Why? Because if we won't know when is the first day, the right first day of the month, then we won't know what day are the holidays. For example, the holiday of Sukkot and the holiday of Pesach, we celebrate on the 15th day of the month. Okay, but Rosh Hashanah, we have a bigger problem because that's on the first day of the month. Okay, so that's very important to know when is the exact right day of the first day of the month in order to get to the right day of the holiday. Come to Gemara and teaches us a very important rule that we all need to remember, will help us to relax a little bit, that anyway, no matter what, the court system, the Beis Din, is the one to decide when is the first day of the month. So even if we didn't have two witnesses, or we had witnesses that came and gave us the wrong date, yet the court system decides when is the first day. And anyway, in Judaism, we have either 30 days or 29 days, no 28, no 31. Okay, in the Gemara, we had sometimes a problem that we didn't have witnesses on the 30th day. So they had, on the 31st day, they had to decide that yesterday was the first day of the month, for example. And now I want to go into a fascinating story that we have, happens to be on this Daf Yomi that we learn every day. We learn a page from the Gemara in order to finish the Gemara in 7.5 years. So we are doing it for over 2 years now, almost 2 years actually, soon 2 years. So you're welcome to join in 5.5 years from now. We'll finish the round. But the Gemara gives us a fascinating story, okay, that two people came in front of the court, okay, in front of the Beis Din of the head of that system back then was Rabban Gamliel. And they came and told him that they saw the moon, okay, on the 30th day, okay, and so we mentioned, if you remember, we mentioned earlier that if we see it on the 30th day, so we must see it also on the next day, not like if we see it on the 29th day, then there's a period of time that we do not see the moon. Okay, so people went out that night and expected to see the new moon, okay, the beginning of the month. It happened to be that they didn't see the moon. Came Rabbi Dosa ben Hukinas and said they're lying. They're lying because if yesterday was the first day of the month, okay, the day that we say that that's the day of the beginning of the month, today we must see, this is the 31st day, we must see the moon. And if we didn't see it, meaning they're lying, okay? Like every argument in Judaism, or I guess everywhere around the world. Come Rabban Gamliel and say, no, I trust them. They are speaking truth, and I am the court. I am the system. I say that they're right, and come on, let's start the month. It happens to be that month, everything's okay? Hope we didn't lose anyone.
There we go.
Okay, happened to be that month was the month of Tishrei, the first month that we all know that if today is Rosh Hashanah, in 10 days from now, it is Yom Kippur. Okay, and if it's Yom Kippur, okay, and let's say according to Rabbi Dosa ben Hukinas, that said that it's not the right day. He said that Yom Kippur needs to be a day after. Okay, who is right? No one will want to violate Yom Kippur, right? I hope not.
Came
Rabbi Yehoshua, the great Rabbi Yehoshua, one of the greatest rabbis that we have in the Gemara, and tells Rabbi Dosa, I believe you. You're right. They didn't speak the truth, the witnesses. And today is not the first day of the month. Tomorrow we need to have the first day of the month, meaning that Yom Kippur is not in 10 days from now. It's in 11 days from now. Now we're going into a big problem, right? Who do we follow? Okay. Again, no one wants to violate Yom Kippur, so we will keep twice Yom Kippur. Gemara tells us we don't need to keep. They tell us a few days ago we don't need to keep 48 hours of Yom Kippur. One day is enough to fast, okay? But the Gemara says, now we have a problem. Stood up Rabban Gamliel and told Rabbi Yehoshua, one of the fascinating stories that we have in the Gemara, and told him, I command you, me as the head of the court system, of the president of Israel, I command you to come on the day of your Yom Kippur, on the day that according to your calendar is Yom Kippur, and you need to come walk, or drive, or violate in other way Yom Kippur, and come to my court, to my house, and show everyone that you agree with the court system. Rabbi Yehoshua was really sad. He said, I know I'm right. Okay, how can I violate my beliefs, right? Came to him Rabbi Akiva, the great Rabbi Akiva that we all know, we all heard of many stories about him, and told him, we saw that he's really upset, and he told him that we have a very important verse from the Torah that tells us as follows. Okay, this verse allows the court system to be the one to decide when is the right day of the holiday. Okay, and the Gemara afterwards gives a braita that explains that this verse, the words otam, instead of writing it aleph, vav, taf, mem, otam means they. Okay, it says only atem, you, meaning that you, the court system, are the ones to decide in the end, the bottom line, when is the right day. So in order to avoid separation, in order to avoid a situation that every other person in Judaism is coming and telling, oh no, my Yom Kippur is next week, I'm following a different opinion. So came a Rabban Gamliel and said, I'm stopping it right here, okay? Because if we will start this problem now, every person will come and say, oh, maybe the court system, the last court system was wrong. Maybe we didn't do right. So now we create a separation in Judaism, something that no one wants. And Rabbi Yehoshua accepted, and he went on his Yom Kippur according to his calendar, walked with his staff and his money, and walked all the way to Yavne, to the system, to the court system, and basically violate what he believed in order to show stay united and not separate the Jewish people. And stood up Rabban Gamliel and gave him a kiss. That was pre-COVID, don't worry, and told him, Bo Shalom, Rabbi v'Talmidi, come, my rabbi and my student. My rabbi, because you're greater than me, you're wiser than me. Okay, you taught me a lot of Torah, and also my student, because you listened to me and accepted what I have to say. And by that, we really basically continue until today, following all the same system of telling us when is the holiday. That was pretty long, but an introduction to the topic that we are going to talk about today. you want to take the?
Yeah.
from here?
Okay, so thanks, Rabbi. Yeah, that's a great text, and it's very fortuitous that it's the Daf Yomi for today. So as Rabbi Yoni taught from that text, the Talmud here establishes that that it's up to the, oh, there's a question.
There's a question about whether if you.
Let's
could
take the
sep-
question in the chat. Go ahead.
Okay, I can't see it, so you need.
Well, the question is whether the rabbis would be willing maybe to separate and take their mask off. It's a little harder to hear.
Oh, yeah, I'm fine. to do that.
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
move a little bit aside and.
Yeah.
Sorry, nothing against you, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, trying to follow the rules,
Don't
sorry.
go out of the screen.
Was that, oh. There we go. How about
Yeah.
this? Okay,
That works.
so something that's interesting about that text is that the takeaway, well, there's two takeaways in my mind. One is that it's up to the community to determine when the holidays, and that, that in of itself is really interesting because, you might think that the day, time is beyond the control of human beings, that the day is the day, it's part of the cosmos, the day comes and that is the holiday irrespective of what we do. Whether we acknowledge the holiday or not, whether we celebrate it or not, or even think that it's the holiday, you might think, but it is, because that's the time. But what this text says is actually different, that the holiday is declared by the community, not by nature on its own. That's one key takeaway. And then the other one that I learned from listening to Rabbi Yoni teach it is that as Rabban Gamliel acted in such a way as to ensure that the entire Jewish community would be on the same page and observe the holiday at the same time. So this, I think, is relevant for our conversation because in respect to how we do things differently in different denominations. This question in the Reform community is a very live and active one, and has been for quite a while. When do you celebrate the holiday? And let me tell you why that's a question in Reform Judaism. So when it comes to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I mean, this is a question because of culture and the realities of life in 21st century America. So when it comes to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we call those the high holidays, even though, as Rabbi Yoni rightly pointed out, they're not as kind of prominent in the Torah as the three festivals, but nevertheless in America, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we think of them as the high holidays. And, significant numbers of Jews in the community will acknowledge that, and they'll take off from work or whatever, and they'll come to the services and observe the holiday on those days. But then you think about holidays like Sukkot and Pesach and Shavuot. A lot of times those holidays fall on a Tuesday, in the middle of the week. And I think in Rabbi Yoni's Orthodox community, I think it's much more common for members of the Orthodox community to take off of work and attend shul on a Tuesday in the middle of the week because it's the holiday. Much more common in Rabbi Yoni's community than it is in mine. In the Reform community, our people are much more inclined to say, that's nice that it's Shavuot, but I go to work on Tuesdays and, sorry. So it has been an ongoing question in Reform Judaism, both with respect to holiday observance and also with respect to Shabbat. And I'll say something about that in a second, about when does the community, meaning the congregation, decide we're going to celebrate the holiday? In many cases in the history of Reform Judaism, and even until today, a Reform congregation might decide, okay, Simchat Torah happens on Monday, but nobody's going to come to the synagogue on Monday because they're going to work and they're in school and everything. So instead, we're going to observe it on Sunday when we think they can come. Or it's also very common for Reformed congregations to make the decision to, and Temple Israel doesn't do this, by the way, but many Reformed congregations do, to say they're going to observe the holidays on the closest Friday night to whenever the holiday is. Why? Because that's when the community is there. And so this text raises the question about what makes a holiday. Is it the fact of the date on the calendar as it reflects, the reality of the cosmos and God's time? Or is a holiday made by the fact of the community deciding to celebrate it as a holiday? That's a tension that we have in Reformed Judaism. One more word about that in respect to Shabbat. So Shabbat is, maybe the most important holiday in Judaism because it comes every week. And we know it comes on Friday night and Saturday. Now, when Reformed Judaism started in America in the late 19th century, its main objective was to create a form of Judaism that would enable Jewish immigrants to America to be both Jewish and American. And in that time period, in the late 19th century in America, I think it's maybe less common today than it was then, but it was very common for the factories and businesses where Jews were employed to require the employees to work on Saturdays. That was part of the American, business week cycle. Everybody worked on Saturdays. And these immigrant Jews who were trying to kind of build a life in America were in a pickle, because they're committed to Judaism. The Shabbat is Saturday and you're not supposed to work on Saturday, but they need to make a livelihood, and establish themselves in America. So when push came to shove, many of them were deciding, I'm going to work on Saturday because I have to, or I'm going to get fired, right? So Reformed Judaism made a couple of adjustments to allow for that. The first adjustment that they did in Reform was decide to instead of Saturday morning being the primary community gathering time for Shabbat, they moved it to Friday night. That's why even in Reformed congregations today, the primary, the most well-attended service of the week is Friday night, not Saturday morning, because we're heirs to that tradition. A second thing that they did, and this was really controversial and didn't really take, but it happened in the 19th century. Some Reformed congregations decided that because their people had to work on Saturdays, but the whole world at that time in America stopped on Sundays because it was the Christian Sabbath, some Reformed congregations decided to move Shabbat to Sunday. That was radical. I mean, and you can imagine, it feels radical to us now. That was radical even in that time, but they decided to do it because they said the community doesn't come here on Saturday. We can't gather a community on Saturday. They're all working, but we can gather them on Sunday. And if what we learned from the Gemara is that it's the community that makes the holiday, well, when can we get our people together? On Sunday. So they tried that. Again, it didn't, that was a bridge too far, and it didn't stick. But this in the Reform community, which really emphasizes, trying to create a form of Judaism that enables people to live fully in both the Jewish world and in the secular world. This is a tension that we deal with all the time. I think probably much more so than the Orthodox community does, and it has to do with culture.
Thank you. That was really interesting. I would like to share a few comments about what you said. I'll go take it back to the Gemara, because it's fascinating about the Gemara. The Bible, what they try to do is to make sure that we are not creating a few different systems. Okay, that we won't have a situation that every congregation, every community will decide, oh, we're keeping Shabbos on that day and not on a different day. Happens to be something very, very important to know. Shabbat, Shabbos, is not in the same level of a holiday. We have Israel mikadshim et hazmanim. The halacha is that the Jews are allowed to decide, like we learned in the calendar, like to decide when the calendar was the first day of the month, and from that when will be the holiday. But Shabbos is always on a Shabbos. Okay, maybe that's one of the reasons that didn't really work to move Shabbos to Sunday. Won't happen. There's a famous story about that in the communist world. They decided to change the weekend to 5 days instead of, I think, 5 or 6 instead of 7. It won't work. The world has 7 days. That's the way it is. Shabbos is always a Shabbos. We as Jews and no one else is able to change Shabbos. That's the day that that Hashem, God, rested. That's the day that we rest. That's about it. I would like to take the conversation back to the holidays. I think Shabbos is a different topic, maybe for a different time. But I want to talk a little bit about the 2 holidays that I think, according to what I read earlier, most amount of Jews around the world are engaged or celebrating these 2 holidays. The first holiday, of course, you all probably know, is coming up soon, Hanukkah. Okay, it's amazing that this is the holiday that really catched up. Okay, and what's fascinating, I didn't know that, fascinating that more Jews observe the Seder, let us say the first night of Pesach, even more than Yom Kippur. That's fascinating. I would like to try to focus maybe on these 2 holidays, try to see what exactly these holidays represent, and you will see that makes no sense that for sure Hanukkah will be a holiday that most people observe. And what's interesting is Hanukkah coming up soon. I think we should all learn about our holidays before, okay? Because we can't decide today. Today we have a calendar. Everyone knows when Hanukkah lands. Everyone knows when Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and of course also Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot. We cannot change them today. We can't decide that okay, we want to move it to Sunday or etc. Then we have the calendar. Everyone accepted the calendar in order to avoid separation between the worlds, between communities, between Judaism. We all follow these calendars. We can't just decide okay, it's easier for us to celebrate it on Sunday instead of Tuesday. We can't do it today because we all accepted 2,000 years ago this calendar. Maybe I'll share a small story of my family. My great parents came to the United States a long time ago. My kids that live now in the United States are basically 6 generations in the United States. But my great-parents had to quit every week because they didn't work on Shabbos, they didn't work on Saturday. Okay, and by keeping that, according to what we believe, and I believe all Jews believe as well, is by following tradition, by holding to standing up to what we believe, that's the way to continue the Judaism. If everyone will decide, oh, it's too hard for me to observe that, it's too easy for me to do that, I think I can do better, it won't work. And we will find ourselves, every Jew will be in a different place, we'll find people that observe the Purim on Yom Kippur and Yom Kippur on Purim. I don't think that's the way that any one of the congregation wants to be these days. Back to Hanukkah. It's fascinating to learn that Hanukkah will go back to the Greeks that came and invaded into the land of Israel and tried to make sure that everyone will accept their traditions, I guess, what they believed in, that was sports and all the things that today I believe are still with us, all the shows and everything, and to show that the people are great and all the gladiators and everything. We all know all these stories. And when they came to the land of Israel, they happened to see that the Jews didn't like it, because in Judaism, it's not about sports. Okay, Judaism is not about showing the body and how great the body is. Judaism is about modesty. Judaism is about keeping the house as a holy place. You can't just decide to do whatever you want. It's not Judaism. And they found out that the Jews stand against what they believed. Didn't happen in other places in the world. It happened only in Israel. And guess what? They told the Jews, okay, if you will observe what we believe, You will survive, you will live. We're not coming here to have a war against you, just, accept our practices. And the Jews, the famous story about Matityahu that stood up and said, no. And he yelled, Mila Hashem Elai, if you believe in God, in Hashem, follow me. And started the rebellion against the Greeks back then. Okay, and thanks to him, we still have the Judaism until today. Who knows what would have happened if he wouldn't have stood up. But it's fascinating that today most Jews don't know that the war, that what we celebrate today, Hanukkah, is that we continued Judaism, okay? We stood up against everything, all the Greeks tried to represent. We stood up and said, no, we're not a part of it. We're continuing with the Torah, we're learning Torah, we're observing the mitzvahs, we're doing the bris, with keeping Shabbat, we're doing all that, okay? And happens to be that today, 2,000 years later, a lot of people that do not observe those things anymore, yet celebrate Hanukkah. And I even heard stories here in Omaha. I hope it's not true, but I heard stories that people light the menorah, light the Hanukkah next to the Christmas tree. And that's exactly what the holiday says. Like, we celebrate the holidays showing that this is not what we are. We stand with our Judaism, with our beliefs against everything. And the idea of lighting the candle against all the Christmas lights is showing that a small light can push away a lot of darkness, okay? Not like electricity. And there's a famous story that Rabbi Ari likes to share of a rabbi that I well known, that when he was a kid, his father was a rabbi in New York, and he stood in front of his menorah, lighting the first candle of the holiday, and looking outside and seeing that year was landed close to Christmas, and he saw outside all the Christmas lights, and he asked his father and told him, Father, what's the point of our small light? Look outside. No one will see my small candle. Everyone has their great Christmas lights. And the second he said that, the electricity fell down, and only his candle stood in that window. And his father told him, you see the difference between Judaism and the rest of the world? Our small light stays forever. And in every Jewish person, there's a small flame, a small light that sometimes needs only like a little bit more oil, a little bit more, something to make it stronger in order to push aside everything that's around us, all the bad things, all the darkness, and to remember that we celebrate the holiday of Hanukkah, okay? Remembering that we are Jews and we believe in what we do, and we'll continue that for many years to come. That's the point of the holiday. I think it's fascinating. I think it's something that everyone needs to know when they stand in front of their menorah, okay? And remember that this candle represents the oil, okay, that the Kohanim, the priest, found in the back in the temple in Beit Midrash, okay? And the miracle that happened, to this small light can stay longer than 8 days. We continue to light it every year, to continue the tradition, to pass it over to our kids, to make sure that we will continue what we believe without separating, without bowing to what the statues or the idols that are around us, without really paying attention to all the lights and all the sounds and all the colors that are around us. Because we as Jews, no matter where we are, in the United States, or in Europe, or in Israel, no matter where, we continue our tradition to believe in what we do and to be proud that we are Jews. I think it's something that Hanukkah is coming up soon. Everyone should know that.
Do we have questions?
Yeah, we have one there that says, can a community decide to start Shabbat earlier?
Earlier, definitely, yes. Okay, on Friday, earlier, there are also rules for that. But yeah, definitely we start Shabbos earlier. For example, when it's summer here and sunset is around 9:30, okay, so we can accept Shabbos earlier, okay? It comes to a different problem afterward that you need to repeat the saying the Shema. The Shema that we say at night must be after the stars are out. So we pray, we daven, we do everything before earlier, but afterwards we repeat again the Shema to fulfill the obligation of saying the Shema at night and not on daytime. But yes, Shabbos we can enter earlier.
So this is another I think interesting difference maybe in our approaches, and it goes again to the question of time. So I know at Beth Israel, the start time of Shabbat and when you would do candle lighting and gather for tefillah and so forth, it changes, of course, throughout the year as the sunset does. Whereas in our Reform community, and in this we are definitely not an outlier. In fact, I think it would be universal. In Reform communities, we have a set time that we start our services on Friday, and when we light candles, and that stays the time for the whole year.
That's interesting.
Yeah, well, and again, the reason for that is because in our community, I would say the consciousness of time is very much within the framework of the time that's the flow of society. So see, this reflects like it's the same reasons really that I was saying before about why some Reform congregations hold the holidays like on the Friday or Sunday that's closest, because that's when the people will come. See, in the Reform community, our people operate on secular time. Now that, we can make an argument of whether that's maybe not a good thing or it is, but the fact is that that's how it is. That's how our people think. And so, whereas in the Orthodox community, it's, of course, you take for granted that you light Shabbat candles at the sunset. And so in the winter, that's going to be at 5 o'clock, and in the evening, it's going to be, or whatever. And in the summer, it's going to be at 9:30. And in Reform Jews, it's like services are at 6. Because that's when services are saying. If we started saying that services are at a different time each week, they'd be like way too confused.
But it's fascinating because it takes us back to the creation of the world.
Yes.
What we believe.
Yeah.
The day starts in Judaism. It's also something that people should know. In Judaism, not like the rest of the world, the day starts on sunset. It says ve'erev ve'voker. It starts from the evening, and then the morning.
Right.
Okay. And not like the rest of the world. And that's the reason that Shabbos enters only when the stars are out. And we have the mitzvah, the obligation to enter Shabbos, to add time to Shabbos. That's why we light candles 18 minutes, sometimes even 22 minutes, according to different opinions, before the stars are out. Okay, that's around the sunset. And the idea is because this is time. Okay?
Yeah, for sure.
This is exactly the topic of what we try to see, that this, no matter what, we can't decide to change, because we do live in a world that has sunset, sunrise.
Right.
We can't say, there's no sunrise, there's no sunset.
Yeah.
We can't.
Yes. However, there's a couple of points that I want to make on this. One is that in thinking about time, there's a wonderful book out there called About Time. The author is Adam Frank, and what he said, he's a scientist, and he puts forth this idea. He says there are two kinds of time. There's what he calls cosmic time. Cosmic time is God's time, right? It's the sun sets when it sets. There's nothing we as human beings can do anything about it. That's what he calls cosmic time. And then he says there's human time. And human time is time that's constructed by us as human beings. So we say, so the class tonight started at 7 o'clock. So Frank points out in his book, he says, 7 o'clock is a human invention. There's no such thing in the cosmos as 7 o'clock, right? This is how we human beings manipulate time to make, like, for our purposes in order to work. I very much, and we're cosmic time, we can't control cosmic time. So the Jewish consciousness, and I'm in full agreement with Rabbi Yoni on this, that the halacha and the way of practicing Judaism is all about elevating our consciousness toward cosmic time. Because, Shabbat begins when the sun sets. It ends when you can see 3 stars in the sky. It's very much tied to cosmic time, and we can't control that. And when we observe, when we say, well, Shabbat starts when the sun sets, that's surrendering our control to something greater. When we say Shabbat starts at 6, because that's what it starts at 6, that's we are asserting our control because we made up 6, right? That's human time. So I want to make that point. However, I also want to go back to something that you said about when you're talking about Shabbat, and you said there's 7 days in a week, like there's nothing you can do about that. But the whole idea of a week in 7 days, that's also human time. That which would be out of the Torah. Yes. However, what Frank's argument is that the idea of first of all the concept, the concept of 7, the concept of hours. We say there's 24 hours in a day. That's all constructed by human beings. That is a superimposition of our organizational system on the cosmos. Like the nature as it is doesn't know anything about 7 days. It could be 3. Right? You can make it whatever you want. And he actually he shows in his book how over the course of history, human concepts of time change. They change as a function of our technology. So it used to be before clocks were invented, you couldn't say I'm going to meet you at 1:15 because there was no such thing as 1:15. It was done by seeing the shadows and whatever. There was a time when trains were invented that altered the way we thought about time because you could travel from one location to another. And so those 2 locations had to be in sync. Before the invention of trains, he said that in Philadelphia, it might be 12:15, and in New York, it might be 12:06, because they're not in sync, because they're not connected. So technology alters the way we understand time. So I would just push against the idea that there's 7 days in a week and there's nothing we can do about it, and say actually there is, because we made it up. Now, you would say the Torah does say it. However, and this is where we also I think would have a point of debate about, the authorship of the Torah and so forth. Anyway, I wanted to make that point about human time versus cosmic time to help us think about, these issues. I had another point too that was made, but I forgot what it was.
Were there any questions?
Yeah, what other questions do we have in there?
It looks like Mr. Greenberg said, how long does it take for the Earth to rotate on its, I think he means axis, 24 hours. So I think what he's, Andy, why don't you go ahead and speak to that question?
Yes, so basically the 24 hours is, I believe, from what I remember in school, that it takes 24 hours for the Earth to rotate on its axis. That's not man-made time. That is the way the Earth does. Now you can get to a question, and that is, who created that Earth to rotate every 24 hours and therefore create a 7-day week? Well, if you believe in the Torah, it's right there. So I've never read Frank's book, so I'm somewhat at a disadvantage. But if I was debating with him, I'd ask him, how do you answer that? Every 24 hours, the Earth rotates.
But the concept of an hour is a human calculation.
Yeah.
You could, we could also divide the day into different segments. In the Talmud, they don't speak about hours. They speak about the watch periods. At the very beginning of the Talmud, talking about the when do you say the evening Shema? The time is divided into quarters, right? Because of the watch.
We call Sha'ot Zmaniyot. We have times according to the daylight. Okay,
yeah.
That's the way we count the time in Judaism until today. A lot of halachot are following the time of the day. We break it down into 12 hours. And then it's less, till what time you can say the Shema in the morning depends by the amount of light, hours of light that you have every day.
Right.
But yet the day is 24 hours.
Okay. So first of all, but 24 hours didn't always exist. That at some point, scientists figured out 24 was the proper way to divided. Oh, but the other point that I wanted to make, and this is from History of Halacha, Jacob Katz, who's a scholar of Halacha, has written a great article about this question of the evening Shema. And he showed that in Europe, like in France and so forth, in communities in France, where at certain times of the year, talk about like the differences, in the winter versus the summer. Here, it's even more pronounced in these northern communities, in Northern Europe. And there's this big halachic debate amongst, major scholars about when the community should gather to say the evening Shema. And there were communities in France that were, although, it didn't get dark until way, late, they would gather in the synagogue in the middle of the day, what was for them the middle of the day, like 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that, and do the evening prayer. They're doing it while it was light out. And the responsa dealing with this talk about, there's some of the rabbis who they're appalled at this and say the congregation is getting together for the Ma'ariv prayer, and it's like the middle of the day and the sun is way out. And so some of the poskim say, some say this is unacceptable, you can't do this at all, and others say this is what the community has decided. They're doing it, and we follow the customs of the people. It's a fascinating issue.
I'll tell you a secret, don't tell anyone. But also that's Israel here in Omaha.
Yeah.
We daven Ma'ariv a little bit earlier, okay, because we daven it right after we gather everyone to Mincha. Okay, then we have a short class. You're all welcome to join. And right afterwards we daven Ma'ariv, okay? But yet sometimes it's before the time that you're supposed to say the Shema. So again, like we mentioned earlier, we say the Shema again afterwards at home, but yet we daven as a community. Okay, so it's not only in Europe a long time ago, it's also today in many places in the world, but yet we follow the guidelines of halacha. We do it after a certain time. There are guidelines that we follow. You can't just decide, okay, it's 7 o'clock in the morning, you daven shachrit right afterwards mincha, right afterwards ma'ariv. It's not the way it works, even if the community wants, because every system has rules that we need to follow. We can't, everyone just learn. Not anyone can decide, okay, my Yom Kippur is tomorrow, not today. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, then you won't have a community, you won't have a minyan for Yom Kippur, because every person will decide, okay, see you tomorrow. It doesn't make any sense. That's why we have a system. That's why we learned the Talmud to see exactly how we learned these halacha. And until today, every rabbi gets questions in halacha that are related to this time that are mostly not ever appear in the Gemara. But if you learn the rules, how to get to the halacha, and you follow the correct line that started all the way back when Moshe Rabbeinu got the Torah on Mount Sinai, and you follow and break it down step by step, then you're able to give a halacha for questions that you get today according to these rules, and you're continuing the same we'll call it the chain. I don't know, like the same necklace. I don't know what to call it. Like the same bar that passes over from generation to generation. But if every rabbi will decide, oh, they don't know what they're saying, I know better than them, then we'll get lost, and we'll find ourselves in 20, 30, 50 years from now. Well, first of all, with less members of the community, because everyone will say, oh, I know better than the rabbi. I know better than the system. I can decide whatever I want. And we'll find ourselves not with a few communities, we'll find ourselves with hundreds of communities. And also the Reform today and also the Conservative today are following, like you mentioned, are following the same guidelines of the Reforms. That, like, today it's fascinating because also the Reforms are pretty much traditional. Okay, also the Conservative are pretty much traditional. What they try to like break off and to move and to try to fit themselves to the new world. Today you see that also they understand that you can't always like extend yourself and fit yourself to the world, because you have to have a system, otherwise we'll lose everyone.
You'd be like clay and iron.
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Doesn't the Torah talk about 12 months, if I remember correctly? And they also talk about the first setting the time, and they define what a month is. Isn't it odd that the secular calendars has 12 months and the Jewish calendar has 12 months, and they talk about the 7 days. I don't know. It would just seem from this perspective that the whole time period and whole time span was not only spelled out in the Torah, but is being used in the secular world today.
I can tell you a secret that many things that the Gemara talks about 2,000 years ago, okay, today's science say that that's the right thing to do. And for example, also the way that they talk about the sunset and sunrise here in the Gemara, only 1,000 years later, science started to talk about the same ideas, and also about the stars and about the universe. The Gemara talks about all these topics long before science agreed with that. So today we can still find disagreements between science and the Gemara. Baruch Hashem, we have still a way to go, but yet we can see that today a lot of things that science do agrees with Judaism. And for me, it's fascinating. Every time I read an article, I say, "Oh, I learned the topic in the Gemara. It's fascinating," and I think it's amazing, and I can't really explain.
Yeah, but I think we also know that science, the cosmology and science of time and so forth has changed since the times of the Gemara. I mean, that's undeniable too. I don't know enough about it but I think it's an oversimplification to say that the time as discussed in the Torah and the Talmud in the system of calendration is exactly the same as it is now. Even the rabbis in the Gemara acknowledge that the advent of calendaring science. I mean, one of the great stories in the in the Talmud, and this also pertains, by the way, to our topic of different ways in which communities observe holidays. There's a story that centers around the question of the second day of the festival. So you all probably know that in Orthodox communities and conservative communities here in America, it is customary to observe 2 days of a festival day. So on Pesach, the Torah says Pesach is 7 days. The first day is a chag, and the 7th day is a chag, meaning a festival day. Here in the United States, and Orthodox and conservative communities would observe the first and the second day of Passover as chag, and then the 7th day, and then an 8th day as chag. That's why, conservative and Orthodox Jews eat matzah for 8 days. Reform Jews eat it for 7. Okay, and that has to do with the issue of the Yom Tov Sheni, the second day of the festival. And the Gemara tells a wonderful story about this whole concept of the second day of the festival, where it came about because the system, to go back to what Rabbi Yoni was teaching about how we determine time, it used to be that witnesses had to come and say that they saw the moon, and then the court would declare the new month has begun. And then, so the Jews who lived near where the court was, they heard the announcement and they knew, but there were Jews who lived far away, so they had to get the message to them. So they used to use this system of torches, like somebody would stand on a hill and light a torch and pass on, and the next guy, the next guy, the next guy. Well, then there was the Talmud tells us there was this community, they were called the Samaritans. The New Testament talks about the Good Samaritans. Why do they call them the Good Samaritans? Because the other Samaritans were bad Samaritans, and the bad Samaritans messed up the whole system. They said, we're gonna mess with the Jews,
just light the fire whatever we want. Then
we're gonna mess with the Jews. So they started lighting torches and messing up the whole system, so that the Jewish community was confused about when the right time was. So the rabbi said, when the Samaritans came and messed up the whole thing, we had to come up with a different system. And then they say there, but now we know, we don't even really need that system anymore of torches or the Pony Express, because we understand how to do mathematical calculations and figure out the calendar. But then they say, but we still observe the Yom Tov Sheni, even so. right? And then there are philosophical reasons for that, which I don't think we need to get into now. But my point in citing that story is that the sages of the Talmud, by their time, they already understood things about how to determine time that earlier generations didn't. Science has evolved, right?
I just want to correct, just a few other details. After they stopped with the fire, with the torches on the mountains, they then sent messengers. Okay, they sent messengers, and only when the court system, when we stopped having the court system after the destruction of the temple of Beit Midrash, then we had to create, because we didn't have the system of witnesses to come and witness. In order to keep the tradition, we had to come up with the calendar. We didn't stop it because we knew how to make the mass. We would continue doing it when B'ezrat Hashem, hopefully we'll have the third temple, the Beit Midrash Shlishi. We'll continue with this idea of the people, the witnesses, to come and witness the moon. By the way, the first mitzvah, the first obligation that we got as a community, as a Jewish community, was the Kiddush HaChodesh, the time. Okay, the idea of creating our own system, separating ourselves from the rest of the world, that was the first mitzvah that we got as a nation, as a community. Okay, before even we left Egypt. In Egypt, this is the first commandment that we got, to create the system. Okay, and we'll continue the same system. Hopefully, when we'll have the right court, the right system to continue that.
Yes.
Even though we know the math and everyone.
But the issue of Yom Tov Sheni, the reason for Yom Tov, the second day originally, was because they couldn't be certain about when the day was, right?
Not only that, because it must be the same system as everyone else. Okay, because to get to Omaha, Nebraska, there are stories that takes a long time to get from Israel to Omaha, Nebraska, to leave Omaha to get to Israel. It takes a long time to the messenger, to the shaliach, to come to Omaha, Nebraska. That's why they had to keep 2 days just in case, even though they knew, because they can count from the last time that the messenger was here. Okay, they can count 30 days or 29 days according to the calendar, according to the math. Yet we continue to do that because guess what? In 180 years or so from now, we won't have this calendar. Or will come a new rule in the United States that we cannot observe this calendar, and then we'll mix up and we won't know when the holiday will land. That's why we're continuing, we call it Zerat Avotenu, continuing what our ancestors did in order to keep the system the same way and not changing it. Because again, if everyone will change and everyone decide to do whatever he wants, we will lose track, we'll lose everything. And then what's the point of tradition if you're not continuing it?
Right, but I think that's the point I'm trying to make, is that the practice of Yom Tov Sheni is about tradition. It's not about actually knowing the right day. Okay,
That's
because it originated in needing to know the right day.
That's
It
right.
originated because the only way to know when the month started was through the messenger system. But now, and the sages admitted already in the Talmud, that we know the right day. We don't need to do Yom Tov Sheni. We just do it because we're upholding tradition, and then there's debate in the
So it's a
halakha
chance.
about whether the Yom Tov Sheni has outlived its purpose. And some say it has outlived its purpose, and others say no.
But the question is if you're willing to take the risk that one day we won't know when is the right day to do the holiday. Because our system, our calendar stops soon. Okay, and what's 180 years in a perspective of history? Nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, in 300 years from now, people will remember us in the same generation that didn't have the calendar. Okay, that's the way the world works. Okay, so in order to make sure we won't get to that problem, we continue tradition. That's what's fascinating about Judaism. All Judaism is about tradition, passing it over to our sons that will pass it over to their sons and next generations to come to continue the same thing. And I'll take a different example. I'm a Sofer Stam. I write tefillin, mezuzot. I check them if anyone wants to bring their tefillin or mezuzot to be checked. I would love to do that. It doesn't cost money. Okay, but it's fascinating. Every time that I open an old mezuzah, okay, and I recognize that it's extremely old, it does something in my heart. I understand that we're continuing the same tradition. When the story that they found tefillin 2,000 years old in Israel in the Qumran caves, for me it's amazing. The same tradition we continuing the same way that they did so long ago. There's a famous story about the Torah when the Yemenite Jews came to Israel, and in the beginning of 1950s, they came to Israel with their Torah. Okay, and we all know that it was they were pretty much isolated from the rest of the world, and they continued their own tradition, and they have different customs and etc. And it was a big, let's call it even, people were scared in Israel that they will come with a different Torah. Then what will happen? What's the right system? What's the right Torah? What will happen if they will open they'll find a different story, a total different story? What will happen? And when the first Torah came to Israel, they right away took the Torah and put it against the Torah that we use today and checked letter by letter, word by word, sentence by sentence, and make sure that's the right thing. Guess what? After 2,000 years of separation, it's the same story, the same words, almost exactly the same letters. There were 7 differences in letters, but didn't change any meaning. For example, in one Torah it was said Ptsua Daka. The word Daka was an Aleph, and the second one was an Hey, but the meaning is the same meaning. And I think that's fascinating. That over 2,000 years, all Jews around the world continued the same Torah, the same tradition, passing it over from generation to generation in such a great strict to make sure that we won't have any differences, that we won't change anything. We'll continue to observe the same Torah that we believe that we got from God, from passing over to Moshe on Al Sinai, the Mount Sinai, all the way back. And I think that's fascinating. And I'm sorry, our time is up.
Time is up.
Let's give one opportunity to have, maybe if anybody has a question that they've been just out there that they've been burning to ask and haven't, we'll take one question. Jump in quickly, or we're going to wrap it up right away. Too slow. All right. I just want to point out a couple things. If you got the reminder this time, there's 2 additions to it. One of them is there's a button there to press that will take you to the YouTube channel for the Federation, and recordings of the Beit Midrash and other programs are there for people to watch. And then the second one is there's another button there to push, and we have the schedule for Beit Midrash listed by date, and then there's another table that's listed by topic. So since the topics are sometimes split. So when you get those reminders, just to highlight the fact that those are there.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shukla.
Thank you.